The sound of gunfire cracked like thunder across the desert plain, each report ricocheting in the soldiers' ears as dust and smoke blurred the horizon. Sergeant First Class Elena Ruiz pressed her back against the rust-eaten hull of a destroyed Humvee, her rifle clutched so tightly that her knuckles burned white beneath her gloves. Her chest heaved, lungs scraping for breath in the stench of diesel and blood. The heat was oppressive, but the weight of command pressed even heavier. She peeked out for a second and saw movement, too quick, too close. "Contact right flank," she barked, her voice hoarse but steady. The younger private to her left, barely 19, scrambled to adjust his sight line, panic in his eyes. She caught that flicker of fear, knew it all too well, but there was no time to coddle. "Breathe, Jensen. Control your shots," she snapped, and her words snapped him back into the present. His rifle cracked 3 times, pushing back the enemy assault, buying them seconds. Seconds, that's all this fight was, stretched and chewed thin until time itself felt unstable. A sudden explosion ripped through the ground 30 yards ahead. Shrapnel screeched through the air like banshees. Elena's ears rang, but she stayed down, one hand pressing on her headset, the other still steadying the rifle. She glanced at the soldier beside her, Corporal Davis, whose arm now bled freely from the blast. He looked at her, eyes wide, lips parted in shock, trying to speak. She shoved a field dressing into his palm. "Wrap it tight. Don't wait for a medic, you hear me? You wait, you die. Keep pressure, stay in the fight." He nodded weakly, his jaw trembling, but his grip tightened on the dressing. "Alpha, this is Bravo 2. We are pinned near the ridge, need immediate support." Elena shouted into the radio, her voice cracking but not breaking. Silence returned, static hissing. The comms were jammed or the other side was already cut off. Her gut twisted. No one was coming. She took a breath, the kind that steadied her even when the world tilted. Then she checked her magazine, half full. The math wrote itself across her mind. 3 soldiers left, combat effective, dwindling ammo, enemy pressure rising. And somewhere out there, beyond the haze of battle, her commanding officer, a colonel hardened by too many tours, was expecting her squad to hold the line. She moved like instinct. "On my mark, we're shifting to the gully. It's cover, and if we move fast, we don't die today." She locked eyes with Jensen. "You hold your fire until I tell you. Waste a bullet and I'll have your ass myself." Jensen gave the quickest nod, sweat streaking his dust-covered face. She turned to Davis, who was still fumbling with the bandage, blood soaking his sleeve. She grabbed it and tied it herself in 2 swift pulls, ignoring his hiss of pain. "You're good. You'll fight with your left. Can you do that?" He gritted his teeth, nodded once. "Good. Stay angry. Stay alive." She looked up, counted the seconds between bursts of enemy fire and shouted, "Move!" They sprinted. Dust exploded around their boots as rounds smacked into the dirt. Her rifle spat back, controlled, methodical, every shot placed like a scalpel cut instead of a wild swing. She heard Jensen curse under his breath but keep pace, and Davis stumble but not fall. They dove into the gully, bodies slamming into the dirt wall, chests heaving as adrenaline pounded through their veins. Elena pressed her helmet against the soil and sucked air. Then, slowly, she lifted her head over the lip. The enemy was regrouping. Insurgents in mismatched gear, AKs in hand, slipping between rocks like shadows. They knew the terrain better. That gave them the edge. She cursed under her breath. "This is bad." Jensen muttered, voice shaking, "We're screwed, Sergeant." She spun on him, jabbing a finger into his vest. "Not screwed. Outnumbered, yeah. Outgunned, sure. But not dead, unless you start thinking like you already are. You want to see your mom again? Then shut up, stay low and listen to me." His jaw locked. He swallowed, nodded. She saw it, the flicker of belief fighting back against terror. That was enough. Davis tried to chuckle through the pain, his face pale. "Remind me never to piss you off in training again." She cracked the faintest grin despite the ringing in her ears. Damn right. Humor was thin armor, but sometimes it kept men alive longer than Kevlar. The sound of engines roared in the distance, trucks, fast and heavy. Reinforcements, but whose? Elena strained to listen, heart hammering. Then the first vehicle crested the ridge. Dust flew, and the unmistakable outline of a US MRAP cut through the smoke. Relief hit her chest like a punch. Friendly armor. "Hold your fire," she shouted. The insurgents panicked, their assault breaking under the sudden arrival. The MRAP's turret thundered, stitching the ridge with heavy fire. The enemy scattered, vanishing into the crags as quickly as they'd appeared. Silence settled again, thick and broken only by Jensen's shaky laughter. The back hatch of the MRAP slammed open, and a tall figure dropped down, striding toward them with a pace that was calm, too calm for this chaos. Colonel Briggs. His face was carved in stone, lines etched from years of war. His gaze swept the scene, took in the blood on Davis, the dirt on their faces, the exhaustion in their eyes. "You held," he said simply. His voice was gravel but steady. Elena snapped to attention, saluting despite the grime caked on her gloves. "Sir. We almost didn't." He studied her, and for a fleeting second, there was something like relief in his eyes. Then his gaze shifted downward. Her uniform shirt had shifted in the scramble, and the hem rode up just enough to reveal a strip of skin, scars across her abdomen, puckered and jagged, old wounds carved into flesh like brutal reminders. The colonel froze. His expression cracked. He knew those marks, knew where they came from. The desert wind carried silence between them, heavy as stone. Elena tugged her shirt back down quickly, her jaw tightening. She met his stare head-on, daring him to say something. But Briggs only said, voice lower now, "Get your men inside. You'll debrief with me later." The way he looked at her, it wasn't just a commander seeing his soldier. It was something else. Recognition maybe. Or suspicion. Elena nodded sharply, masking the storm that churned beneath her ribs. She turned to her soldiers. "You heard the colonel. Move out." They piled into the MRAP, the engine growling as it carried them back toward the FOB. Elena sat in silence, rifle across her lap, eyes locked on the dirt-streaked window. The scars on her abdomen throbbed faintly as if memory itself had teeth. She pushed the thoughts down. She couldn't afford them. Not now. Jensen finally broke the silence. "Sergeant, what happens if next time we're not so lucky?" She didn't look at him, but her voice was steady, ironclad. "Then we make our own luck. That's what soldiers do." But her hand trembled slightly against the rifle stock, and only she knew why. The war wasn't just out there in the desert. It was inside her, carved into her flesh, waiting to claw its way out. And Colonel Briggs had seen it. The ride back to the forward operating base was jarring, every bump in the dirt road rattling through their bones. Inside the MRAP the silence was oppressive. Jensen leaned his helmeted head against the steel wall, eyes half shut but still twitching from adrenaline that hadn't bled out yet. Davis kept pressure on his arm with a dressing that was already crimson, his jaw clenched so hard the veins in his neck bulged. Elena sat upright, rifle across her lap, every muscle locked as though the moment she let go, the whole world would collapse in on itself. She could feel Briggs's eyes on her from across the cabin. The colonel didn't say a word, didn't need to. His silence pressed heavier than any lecture could. Elena forced herself not to meet his gaze, instead keeping her eyes fixed on the horizon through the armored glass. She told herself it was exhaustion, but she knew it was something else, something colder. He had recognized the scars. And recognition meant memory, memory meant knowledge, and knowledge was dangerous. When the convoy reached the FOB, soldiers rushed to unload casualties. Davis was whisked away to the medical tent, swearing through gritted teeth that he'd be back on the line before anyone could forget him. Jensen lingered, unsure, still riding the razor edge of terror and adrenaline. Elena clapped him on the shoulder as he hesitated at the ramp. "You fought today. Don't ever forget that," she told him. He swallowed hard. "I almost froze." "You didn't? That's the only part that matters." She said it with conviction, though she knew damn well how close he had come to breaking. But she'd seen it before, raw recruits trying to reconcile the fantasy of war with its brutal, unrelenting truth. Sometimes they broke. Sometimes they hardened. Which way Jensen would fall wasn't clear yet. When the others dispersed, Briggs gestured for Elena to follow him. She obeyed, her boots crunching against the gravel, each step measured, controlled. They cut across the base toward the command post, soldiers saluting the colonel as he passed. His reputation was iron. Briggs was known for being ruthless in command but fiercely protective of those under him, a man who had survived 3 tours and never left his people behind. Inside the command tent, the air was cooler but thick with tension. Maps sprawled across tables, radios crackled with reports, and junior officers snapped to attention. Briggs waved them out until only he and Elena remained. "Sit," he said. Elena sat, back straight, eyes fixed forward. Briggs studied her for a long moment. "You've been carrying those scars a long time." Her jaw tightened. "With respect, sir, my medical history is not your concern." His gaze sharpened. "When it's written all over your body, when it tells me you've already been through hell and walked out alive, it damn well is my concern." Elena stayed silent. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction. Briggs leaned closer, lowering his voice. "I know what those marks are. I saw them on POWs 15 years ago. Prisoners who weren't supposed to make it out. Most didn't. The few who did, never wore a uniform again. His eyes narrowed. So tell me, Sergeant, how the hell are you sitting in front of me, leading men into combat? Elena's pulse hammered. Images flickered, dark cells, screams in the night, the sharp bite of steel against flesh. She crushed them down, burying them where they belonged. With all due respect, sir, she said evenly, I earned this uniform. That's all that matters. For a moment she thought he'd press harder. Instead, Briggs sat back, his expression unreadable. You saved your squad today, he said. Held under impossible pressure. That's what I need out here. Not excuses. Not ghosts. Yes, sir. But make no mistake, he added, voice like gravel, whatever you're hiding, it will come to light. And when it does, you'd better be ready for the consequences. The words hit like a blow, but Elena didn't flinch. She simply nodded. Understood. He dismissed her and she left the tent with her head high, though inside she felt like she was bleeding again, all over the dirt. That night the FOB was restless. Mortar fire in the distance, radios buzzing with chatter about insurgent movements regrouping after the failed ambush. Elena sat outside her barracks, cleaning her rifle by lantern light, hands working on autopilot. The weapon was muscle memory, something she could control, unlike the past clawing at the edges of her mind. Jensen found her there, hovering awkwardly before sitting on an ammo crate nearby. Sergeant, he said quietly, how do you stop seeing it? She didn't look up. Seeing what? The faces. The ones you shoot. The ones that almost shot you. I close my eyes and they're there. Elena's hands paused on the rifle. She knew that feeling too well. You don't stop seeing them, she said finally. You learn to carry them. Some days it's lighter. Some days it's crushing. But you keep moving. Because the moment you stop, they own you. He nodded, though the answer didn't bring him comfort. He looked down at his boots. Do you ever get used to it? Elena reassembled the rifle with a sharp click. No. And that's what keeps you human. He absorbed that in silence. Then, to her surprise, he smiled faintly. You make it sound like we still have a chance out here. She met his gaze and for once, allowed a trace of warmth in her voice. We always have a chance. Otherwise we wouldn't fight. The words seemed to anchor him even if just for a night. The next morning came with fire. Literally. The FOB shook under the impact of mortars at dawn, explosions rocking the perimeter. Sirens wailed, soldiers scrambled to defensive positions, and the world once again erupted in chaos. Elena grabbed her gear, heart already racing, shouting orders as her squad formed up. Jensen was with her, face pale but steady. Davis limped out of the medical tent, bandage still fresh, refusing to stay behind. The insurgents had rallied faster than expected. Trucks bristling with heavy weapons surged toward the wire, RPGs streaking into the base. The air filled with smoke, dirt, and screams. Squad on me. Elena yelled, leading them to the east wall where the fighting was heaviest. Bullets pinged off barriers, tracers cutting through the air like streaks of fire. She raised her rifle, firing controlled bursts, cutting down attackers as they swarmed. Reloading. Jensen shouted, fumbling but correcting quickly, sliding a new mag home. Davis returned fire one-handed, his left arm holding steady despite the pain. Come on, you sons of bitches, he roared, laughter bubbling through his rage. Elena climbed to the firing step, surveying the battlefield. Dozens of insurgents, maybe more, closing in. The base wouldn't hold if they breached. She keyed her radio, trying to cut through the chaos. Command, this is Ruiz. East wall is critical, we need support now. Static. Then Briggs's voice, calm but urgent. Hold, Sergeant. Reinforcements are inbound. Just hold. She gritted her teeth. They had to last long enough. An RPG slammed into the wall nearby, sending dirt and concrete raining down. Jensen cried out as debris struck his helmet, dazing him. Elena grabbed him by the collar, yanking him back to cover. Stay with me, Private, she barked. His eyes were glassy, but he nodded, forcing himself to focus. Davis, suppress that launcher, she ordered. Davis fired wildly, rounds kicking up dirt around the RPG team. Then a thunderous boom split the air as a .50 cal mounted on a Humvee opened up from behind them, shredding the insurgent line. Relief surged through the defenders as the enemy assault faltered. But Elena wasn't relieved. She saw it, the second wave moving from the north, using the chaos as cover. If they hit the wall while everyone was focused east, the FOB would be overrun. She had seconds to decide. Jensen with me, she shouted, vaulting from the firing step. He scrambled after her, confusion on his face. Where? North wall. Move. They sprinted through smoke and fire, weaving between scrambling soldiers. When they reached the north perimeter, she was right. The enemy was already at the wire, cutters in hand, rifles blazing. Only a skeleton crew defended it. Elena didn't hesitate. She raised her rifle and fired, dropping 2 insurgents before they knew she was there. Jensen followed suit, fear turning into grim focus as he laid down suppressive fire. Hold them back. Elena shouted, her voice raw. The fight was brutal, close quarters. Grenades shook the ground, bullets snapped past their heads. Elena felt one slam into her vest, the impact like a hammer to the ribs, but she stayed standing, gritting her teeth through the pain. Then she saw him, a tall insurgent leader, rallying his fighters, waving them forward. If he breached the wire, the others would follow. Elena charged. Her rifle barked, but he kept coming, armor catching the rounds. She slammed into him, the 2 of them crashing into the dirt, fists and blades flashing. Pain lanced through her side as his knife nicked her, tearing cloth, grazing one of the old scars. Rage exploded in her chest. She twisted, slammed her forearm into his throat and pulled the trigger point blank. His body went limp. Breathless, she pushed him off and staggered to her feet. Jensen was still firing, keeping the rest at bay until reinforcements arrived. Finally, the roar of helicopters cut through the smoke. Apache gunships swept in, unleashing hell on the insurgent ranks. Within minutes, the assault broke, survivors scattering into the desert. The base was saved barely. Elena leaned against the wall, chest heaving, sweat and blood mixing on her uniform. Jensen stumbled over, wide-eyed. You took him down by yourself, he said, awe in his voice. She shook her head. No. We all did. Don't ever forget that. But inside, she felt the weight of what just happened, the scars burning, the colonel's words echoing. The past wasn't staying buried. It was bleeding into the present, and sooner or later, it was going to consume her. As medics rushed to the wounded and soldiers cheered their survival, Elena caught sight of Briggs watching her from across the chaos. His expression wasn't relief. It was calculation. And she knew then, whatever he suspected, he wasn't going to let it go. The smoke from the battle lingered long after the gunfire faded, hanging low over the base like a shroud. Soldiers moved with the mechanical urgency of survival, dragging the wounded, stacking sandbags where the wall had buckled, counting ammo that had dwindled faster than anyone wanted to admit. The stench of cordite, blood, and diesel clung to the air so thick it burned the throat. Elena paced the perimeter with her rifle slung across her chest, eyes scanning beyond the wire even though she knew the enemy had pulled back. Her body hummed with the leftover charge of combat, every nerve still expecting the crack of another shot. She hated this part, the false calm after chaos, when the adrenaline began to sour into exhaustion. That was when the doubts crawled in. Jensen trudged beside her, helmet askew, uniform streaked with soot. He looked like hell, but there was a strange steadiness in his eyes that hadn't been there the day before. He had fought, bled, and hadn't broken. "Sergeant," he said after a long silence, "you think they'll come again tonight?" Elena kept scanning the desert. "They're regrouping. They'll hit us again when they think we're weak. Could be tonight. Could be tomorrow. Could be a week. Doesn't matter. Our job is the same." Jensen let out a humorless laugh. "Stay alive." "Damn right," she said. When their patrol ended, Elena returned to the barracks to strip off her gear. The moment her vest came off, pain bloomed in her ribs where the round had slammed her earlier. She peeled back her shirt and winced at the deep bruise already purpling across her side, right over the lattice of scars that never seemed to fade. For a second she stared at them, the way they cut across her flesh like someone had tried to carve out pieces of her humanity. She tugged the shirt down quickly as if the very air might be watching. A knock came at the door. "Sergeant, Colonel wants you," a private called. Of course he did. Elena straightened, forced the pain down, and made her way back to the command tent. Briggs was waiting inside, bent over a map, his sleeves rolled up, arms corded with muscle and scars of his own. He didn't look up as she entered. "You disobeyed my order," he said flatly. She stiffened. "Sir? I told you to hold the east wall. You abandoned it." Her jaw locked. "With respect, sir, the north wall was about to collapse. If they breached, we'd be dead. I made the call." Briggs's eyes lifted, sharp as razors. "And you were right. But next time you tell me before you go running off like a damn cowboy. You don't carry this war alone, Sergeant." She met his gaze, unflinching. "Understood." For a long moment they just stared at each other, the silence thick with things unsaid. Finally Briggs leaned back, folding his arms. "You fight like someone with nothing left to lose?" he said. Elena's stomach twisted. She kept her face impassive. "I fight like a soldier." Briggs studied her, then nodded slowly. "Maybe. But I'm watching you. Whatever made you into this, it's going to come out. And when it does, I need to know it won't break you, or this unit." "Yes, sir," she said, voice steady, though inside she felt anything but. He dismissed her, but as she turned to leave, his voice stopped her. "One more thing. Tomorrow we're going out. Recon 20 clicks east. Intel says the enemy is massing. I want you leading point." Her pulse quickened. Leading recon in hostile territory meant one thing: risk. High personal bloody risk. "Yes, sir." The next day the desert stretched endless before them, a sea of sand and stone baking under the sun. Elena led the patrol, Jensen on her flank, Davis trailing with 2 other soldiers. They moved in silence, eyes sweeping every ridge, every shadow. Hours passed, sweat soaking their gear, nerves stretched taut. Then as they crested a rise, Elena froze. Through her scope she saw them. Insurgents clustered around trucks half hidden in a canyon. Weapons stockpiled. RPGs, heavy machine guns, crates of ammunition. Enough firepower to level the FOB 10 times over. "Holy shit," Davis whispered. Elena pulled back, her mind racing. They couldn't take this fight, not with 5 men. But if they retreated without intel, the base would be blind. She keyed her radio. "Command, this is Ruiz. We've got a staging ground. Coordinates transmitting now." Static crackled back, then Briggs's voice. "Copy, Ruiz. Do not engage. Repeat, do not engage. Fall back." Elena hesitated. The insurgents were moving fast, loading weapons onto trucks. If they left now, that arsenal would be unleashed on the FOB by nightfall. Her chest tightened. "Sir, if we don't hit them now." "That's an order, Sergeant." "Fall back." Her squad looked at her, waiting. Trusting. Every decision she made was a coin flip between life and death. Her stomach churned with the weight of it. She exhaled slowly. "Copy, command." Falling back. They turned, slipping down the ridge. But fate had other plans. A sentry's shout rang out. A crack of gunfire split the air. Bullets tore through the rocks around them. "Contact!" Elena yelled, diving for cover. The canyon erupted with gunfire. The insurgents had seen them, and retreat was no longer an option. Jensen suppressed left. "Davis, cover the trucks," she shouted, firing bursts that echoed across the canyon. The squad returned fire, but they were outnumbered 3-1. Bullets whined past, ricocheting off stone. One soldier went down with a scream, clutching his leg. Blood sprayed across the dirt. "Medic!" Jensen shouted, crawling to drag him back. Elena's world narrowed to a tunnel of noise and fire. She saw one of the trucks starting up, insurgents piling in. If that truck escaped with the weapons, the FOB was finished. Her gut screamed. Orders be damned. She bolted from cover, sprinting down the slope as bullets tore the air. Jensen shouted after her, but she didn't stop. She raised her rifle, aimed at the truck's windshield, and fired. Glass shattered, the driver slumping forward. The truck swerved, crashing into a rock. Ammunition spilled, crates tumbling across the dirt. But the move left her exposed. A round slammed into her shoulder, spinning her to the ground. Pain exploded white-hot. She gasped, the taste of iron flooding her mouth. Jensen was suddenly there, firing over her, dragging her back by her vest. "You're insane," he shouted, voice cracking. "Shut up and shoot," she snarled, teeth gritted against the pain. They fought, side by side, until the roar of helicopters filled the sky. U.S. gunships swooped in, missiles streaking into the canyon. Explosions rocked the ground, fireball after fireball consuming the enemy trucks. The insurgents scattered, broken. Silence fell, broken only by the crackle of flames. Elena lay back against the dirt, chest heaving, blood soaking her sleeve. Jensen hovered, pale and trembling. "You almost died," he whispered. She forced a grin through the pain. "Almost doesn't count." When reinforcements arrived, Briggs himself strode into the canyon. His gaze swept the wreckage, then landed on Elena. She could see the fury simmering under his calm exterior. "You disobeyed a direct order," he said quietly. She met his eyes, voice hoarse but defiant. "If I hadn't, that arsenal would be headed for our base right now." Briggs stared at her for a long moment, then glanced at the burning trucks. He exhaled slowly, as though the weight of command pressed heavier than ever. "You saved lives today," he admitted. But insubordination gets soldiers killed too. Don't think for a second this is over. Elena didn't flinch. Understood. But inside her blood ran cold. The line she walked, between obedience and survival, was getting thinner by the day. And she wasn't sure how much longer she could stay on it without falling. As medics patched her shoulder and the helicopters carried them back to base, Elena closed her eyes, exhaustion dragging at her bones. But in the darkness behind her eyelids she saw the scars again, glowing like brands. And she knew with bone-deep certainty, the war outside was nothing compared to the one still clawing at her from within. The base was quieter that night, but it wasn't peace. It was exhaustion disguised as stillness, the kind of silence that settles after too much chaos, when every soldier is too drained to talk, too wary to celebrate. Floodlights hummed, casting long shadows over the broken wall. The desert wind carried the smell of burnt fuel from the canyon, a bitter reminder of what they'd just survived. Elena sat on her bunk with her shirt stripped away, her shoulder freshly bandaged. The medic had insisted she take painkillers, but she'd refused. She wanted her mind clear, even if her body screamed. Every heartbeat throbbed in the wound, each pulse dragging her back to the moment the bullet ripped through her. She flexed her fingers slowly, testing. She could still fight. That was all that mattered. But when she looked down, the scars glared back at her from beneath the dressing. Jagged, puckered lines carved years ago, reminders of the place she never spoke of. She clenched her jaw and pulled her shirt back down, covering them as if the fabric could erase memory. A knock at the door pulled her from the spiral. Jensen stepped in, awkward as always, holding 2 steaming mugs. "Coffee," he said, setting one on her crate turntable. "Figured you wouldn't sleep anyway." She raised a brow. "You're learning." He gave a faint smile and sat across from her. For a long moment they drank in silence, the hum of the bass filling the space between them. Finally Jensen spoke, voice low. "You scared the hell out of me out there." "You weren't the only one scared," Elena admitted. He blinked. "Wait, you." "Of course me," she said, taking another sip. "Fear keeps you alive. The trick is not letting it run the show." Jensen leaned forward. "But you didn't freeze. You just moved. Like you already knew what had to happen." Her eyes darkened. "That's not instinct, Jensen. That's scars teaching me not to hesitate." He noticed her glance at her abdomen, where the fabric shifted with her movement. He didn't ask, but his silence said enough. She stared at him, daring him to speak, but he didn't. He just nodded slowly, accepting her answer without pushing further. For that, she felt an unexpected flicker of gratitude. The following morning, the base was buzzing. Recon drones had picked up new movement, scattered insurgent forces regrouping deeper in the desert. Command believed a major offensive was coming. Briggs assembled the platoon in the yard, his voice booming over the wind. "They want to break us. They failed twice. They will fail again. But make no mistake, this will get worse before it gets better. We hold here or this sector falls. And if it falls, towns burn. Civilians die. We don't let that happen." The men shouted in response, voices echoing with grim determination. Elena stood in formation, shoulder aching, but she didn't flinch. Briggs's eyes swept over the soldiers, pausing on her for the briefest moment. The weight of that stare pressed into her chest like another scar. Later Briggs pulled her aside. "You disobeyed me again," he said bluntly. "You're welcome," Elena shot back. His jaw ticked. "You think you're untouchable because you save lives. You're not. Disobedience kills, Sergeant." Her eyes narrowed. "So does hesitation." For a moment their stares locked, 2 wills clashing. Then Briggs exhaled, rubbing his temple. "You're a damn good soldier," he muttered. "But you're carrying something I don't trust yet. Those scars, you were a prisoner once, weren't you?" Elena's pulse spiked. She forced her face to stone. "That's not relevant to my service. It's relevant if it breaks you when men are counting on you." "It won't," she said, her voice like iron. Briggs studied her for a long time, then nodded once. "Fine. You'll prove it. Tomorrow you lead a convoy escort. Supplies are running thin, and if those trucks don't get through, we all starve." Elena swallowed the surge of tension in her chest. Convoy duty was a death sentence in this terrain. Ambushes, IEDs, sniper fire. But she only said, "Yes, sir." The next day the convoy rolled out. 3 supply trucks sandwiched between 2 armored vehicles, dust clouds rising around them as they rumbled down the barren road. Elena rode in the lead MRAP, eyes scanning the ridges. Jensen sat across from her, his hands tightening and loosening around his rifle. "Feels too quiet," he muttered. "It always does before it isn't," Elena replied. Her words proved prophetic. An explosion ripped the earth beneath the second truck, fire and shrapnel erupting into the sky. The convoy jolted to a stop. Screams rang out as soldiers scrambled from the burning vehicle. Ambush! Elena roared, already kicking open the hatch. Bullets rained from the ridges, insurgents firing down in coordinated waves. Elena sprinted to the side of the road, using the smoking wreckage as cover, her rifle snapping up to return fire. Jensen flanked left. Davis, get those drivers out, she shouted. Jensen obeyed, sliding into position, his shots precise and controlled. Davis dragged a bleeding soldier from the flames, ignoring his own wound. Elena's eyes swept the ridge. She spotted the glint of an RPG launcher. Her stomach dropped. RPG. Take him out, she yelled, firing upward. Her rounds pinged off the rock, but Jensen's shot found the target, the launcher dropping before it could fire. For a moment it seemed like they might hold. Then another explosion roared, an IED planted ahead on the road, cutting off their retreat. The convoy was trapped. Panic rippled through the men, but Elena shouted over the chaos. We're not dying here. Form a perimeter. Hold your sectors. Her voice cut through the fear, anchoring them. The soldiers rallied, firing in disciplined bursts, slowing the enemy's advance. But the insurgents were relentless, waves pressing closer. Elena's shoulder screamed with every shot, blood soaking through her bandage, but she didn't let it slow her. Then she saw him, an enemy fighter breaking from cover, charging with a satchel charge toward the lead truck. Stop him, she screamed, unloading her magazine. Her bullet struck, but he kept coming, adrenaline fueling him. Jensen fired, missing by inches. Elena sprinted. Time slowed, every breath like fire in her lungs. She tackled the fighter just as he reached the truck, the satchel tumbling away. They crashed to the ground, grappling in the dirt. His knife flashed, slicing across her side. Pain flared, tearing open one of the old scars. Rage consumed her. She slammed her fist into his face once, twice, then wrenched the knife free and drove it into his chest. His body went limp beneath her. She rolled off, gasping, blood warm against her skin. The satchel lay a foot away, wires exposed. She grabbed it, ripping the detonator free before it could ignite. The battlefield roared around her, but for a moment, all she felt was the raw burn of the reopened scars. She pressed a hand to her side, staggering to her feet. Sergeant. Jensen was suddenly there, eyes wide with panic. He saw the blood, saw the jagged wound. I'm fine, she snapped, though she could barely stand. Together they fell back behind cover as the MRAP turret opened fire, mowing down the attackers. Reinforcements finally arrived, Apache gunships sweeping overhead, unleashing missiles into the ridges. The insurgents scattered, broken once again. When the dust cleared, the convoy was in ruins, but survivors lived. Supplies saved. The cost was heavy but not fatal. Elena slumped against the truck, her vision blurring. Medics rushed to her, trying to press gauze into her wound, but she pushed them away. Her eyes locked on Briggs as he strode into the chaos, his face unreadable. You disobeyed me again, he said quietly. Her laugh was bitter, laced with pain. Seems to be a habit. You risked your life. You saved the convoy. And you tore yourself open in the process. His eyes dropped briefly to her side, where the blood soaked her shirt, scars bared again. His jaw tightened. You can't keep this up, Sergeant. Whatever past you're dragging with you, it's going to kill you. Elena's vision dimmed, but she forced her voice steady. Then it kills me fighting. That's the only way I know. Briggs stared at her, something shifting behind his eyes. Not anger. Not suspicion. Something closer to fear. For the first time Elena saw it, the colonel wasn't just questioning her. He was haunted too. Maybe by the same scars, different battles. But before she could speak, darkness pulled her under. When she woke in the infirmary hours later, Jensen sat nearby, head bowed, his rifle across his knees like a guardian. He looked up when she stirred, relief flooding his face. You're alive, he said. Damn right, she rasped. But deep down, she wondered how many more times she could say it before the past, and the war, caught up to her for good. The infirmary lights buzzed faintly overhead, sterile and unrelenting. Elena hated this place. The smell of disinfectant, the quiet murmur of medics, the way every sound reminded her she wasn't outside where the real war was. She lay still on the cot, bandaged tight across her shoulder and abdomen, feeling the ache of stitched skin and the heavier weight of memory pressing into her chest. She'd been here before, years ago, except last time there hadn't been American flags or disciplined medics. Last time, the ones patching her up were the same ones who had carved the wounds in the first place. Jensen had barely left her side. He was there again now, dozing in a chair, rifle resting across his knees. She studied his face in the dim light, creased with exhaustion, younger than the war had any right to make him. A flicker of something softened in her chest before she forced it back down. There wasn't room for softness out here. The door creaked open. Colonel Briggs stepped inside, his boots heavy against the floor. He didn't speak at first. He simply stood, his silhouette sharp against the light from the hall, studying her like he was searching for a weakness he couldn't quite define. "You should be dead," he said finally. "I've heard that before," Elena muttered, her throat raw. Briggs walked closer, lowering his voice. "The convoy should have been wiped out. They had us cornered. But you," his eyes lingered on the edge of her bandages. "You fight like someone who's already survived the worst. I want to know why." She looked away, staring at the ceiling. "With respect, sir, what I've survived doesn't matter. What matters is I'm still here, and I'll keep being here until the job's done." Briggs leaned in, voice taut. "It matters if it means you're hiding things from me. From your team. You think scars don't bleed again? They do, Sergeant. And sometimes they bleed at the worst possible time." Her jaw clenched. "Then you shouldn't have sent me out there." "I sent you," he said, steel in his tone, "because I knew you'd finish the mission even if it killed you. That's exactly what terrifies me." Their eyes locked, an unspoken battle stretching between them. Then Briggs straightened. "You've got 48 hours. After that, I need you operational. And if you're not," he let the threat hang in the air, unfinished but heavy. He turned and left without another word. When the door closed, Jensen stirred awake. What the hell was that about? Elena forced a half smile. Colonel pep talk. Didn't sound like one. She didn't answer. The truth was clawing at her throat, but saying it out loud would make it too real. She turned away, eyes tracing the cracks in the plaster, listening to the silence press in. 2 days later she was back on her feet, stitches tugging with every move. Briggs wasted no time. The unit had intel on an insurgent stronghold deep in the desert. A cave system being used to stockpile weapons and train fighters. It was the source of the ambushes, the convoy strikes, maybe even the prison camps. Command wanted it destroyed. Briggs called the squad together in the briefing room, maps spread across the table. "We've been hitting ghosts," he said, voice sharp. "Striking patrols, convoys, hit-and-run fighters. But this is their heart. We cut it out, they bleed. We go in, plant charges, and walk out with their stronghold reduced to rubble." The soldiers leaned in, scanning the maps. Elena traced the jagged lines of the canyon on paper. The cave system stretched deep, with multiple exits. A nightmare to clear, but not impossible. "What's our evac plan?" Jensen asked. Briggs pointed to a ridge 2 clicks east. "Birds will be on standby. But once we're inside, it's just us. No cavalry until we're out." The room was silent, tension thick. Everyone knew what that meant. If they got stuck, no one was coming. Elena's voice cut through the quiet. "When do we leave?" That night, under a moonless sky, they moved out. The desert air was cold, biting through their gear as they trudged across the sand. Shadows stretched long across the dunes, the only sound the crunch of boots and the distant hum of wind. They reached the canyon before dawn. Jagged cliffs loomed above them, and the dark mouth of the cave yawned ahead like some beast waiting to devour them. Elena felt the weight of it in her chest, the same heaviness she'd felt once before, walking into a place she knew she might never leave. She shook it off and gripped her rifle tighter. Briggs gave the signal. The squad split into teams, moving silently into the cave. The air inside was cooler, damp, carrying the echo of dripping water. Their flashlights swept across walls scarred with soot and crude carvings. At first it seemed abandoned. Empty crates, scorched fire pits, the remnants of hurried meals. But then came the sound, voices deeper inside, the clatter of metal, the distant shuffle of boots. Elena's pulse quickened. She raised her hand, signaling halt, and crouched low, listening. A patrol was coming. She gestured to Jensen, and together they melted into the shadows against the rock wall. 2 insurgents rounded the corner, rifles slung loosely, laughing in low voices. They never saw her. Elena lunged, wrapping an arm around the first man's neck, knife flashing quick across his throat. Jensen silenced the second with a single suppressed shot. The bodies slumped soundlessly to the ground. The squad moved forward, deeper into the labyrinth. Every step tightened the coil in her gut. It was too familiar, the dark, the echoes, the way the walls seemed to close in. She forced her breathing steady, pushing back the memories clawing at her mind. They reached a wide cavern lit by lanterns. Dozens of fighters milled about, weapons stacked against the wall, crates piled high with explosives. It was their jackpot. Briggs signaled the demolitions team. Plant charges. Quiet and fast. Elena and Jensen covered the perimeter while others set the explosives. She scanned the cavern, every sense on edge. Then she froze. On the far wall, chained to a post, were prisoners. Thin, hollow-eyed, their wrists raw from iron shackles. One of them, a young woman, looked up as Elena's light swept across her. Their eyes met, and something in Elena cracked wide open. She was back there again, shackled, beaten, her body nothing but pain and defiance. She saw herself in that woman's eyes, fear buried under layers of exhaustion, the spark of survival barely clinging. Her hands shook. She lowered her rifle, chest heaving. Jensen noticed. "Elena." "We can't leave them," she whispered, voice fierce. Briggs turned, eyes narrowing. "Our mission is demolition, not rescue. Sir, they'll die if we don't." "They'll die if we blow the charges with them inside," Briggs snapped. "We clear the cave, plant the bombs, then call an extraction. That's the mission." Elena's blood boiled. "So we're just supposed to ignore them? Leave them like animals in a cage?" Briggs stepped close, voice low and cutting. "You're letting your past cloud your judgment. I know what you're seeing. But this isn't about you." Her scars burned under the bandage. She wanted to scream. Instead, she forced the words through gritted teeth. "With respect, sir, you're wrong. This is about every single one of them. We don't get to pick who deserves saving." The cavern fell silent, tension snapping tight. Every soldier watched, waiting. Briggs's eyes were steel. "You defy me here, Sergeant, and you put the entire mission at risk." Elena lifted her chin. "Then I guess I'll take that risk." For a long moment, no one moved. Then Jensen stepped forward, voice steady. "She's right. We can't leave them." One by one, others nodded, the weight shifting. Briggs's jaw flexed, fury in his eyes, but he finally hissed, "Fine. But if this goes sideways, it's on your head." Elena didn't care. She moved fast, cutting chains, pulling the weak and battered to their feet. The prisoners clung to her, their hands trembling as they realized they weren't being abandoned this time. But then came the shout. An insurgent patrol stumbled into the cavern, eyes widening at the sight of soldiers and freed captives. The alarm echoed through the tunnels, voices rising, boots pounding. "Contact!" Briggs roared. Chaos erupted. Gunfire thundered, bullets sparking off rock. Elena shoved the prisoners behind cover, firing in controlled bursts to hold the line. Jensen was beside her, calm and precise, covering the rear. "Charges are live," the demolitions team yelled. "We've got 5 minutes. Move," Briggs ordered. They began the desperate retreat, dragging prisoners with them, the cave alive with muzzle flashes and screams. Insurgents poured in from side tunnels, relentless. Elena fired until her rifle clicked empty, then switched to her sidearm, every shot buying another second. They reached the mouth of the cave just as the charges detonated. The earth shook, a thunderous roar swallowing the night. Fire blasted from the entrance, collapsing rock sealing the tunnels. The shockwave hurled them to the ground, dust choking the air. When the rumble faded, silence fell. The stronghold was gone. Elena pushed herself up, ears ringing, chest heaving. Around her, soldiers coughed, prisoners wept in disbelief. Jensen was at her side, gripping her arm. "We made it." Briggs staggered to his feet, face streaked with soot, eyes blazing. He looked at Elena for a long moment, his jaw tight, then turned away. The evac choppers arrived at dawn, blades cutting through the dust. They loaded the prisoners first, then the squad. As the helicopter lifted into the sky, Elena stared down at the canyon, smoke still curling from the ruins. She should have felt victory. Instead, all she felt was the weight of Briggs's glare still burning into her back, and the gnawing truth that this wasn't over. Not for her scars. Not for the war. The desert stretched endless below, unforgiving, and somewhere out there, more caves, more enemies, more ghosts waited. And she wasn't sure how much longer she could outrun hers. The helicopters cut across the desert sky, beating the dawn into submission with their blades. Elena sat strapped into the side bench, sweat streaking through the dirt and blood on her face, her eyes fixed on the horizon as if she could burn holes through it. Around her, the rescued prisoners slumped in exhaustion, their faces hollow but alive. Her squad sat with rifles across their laps, silent in the wake of what they'd just survived. The roar of the rotors drowned conversation, but the silence between soldiers spoke louder than words, every one of them replaying the cave, the gunfire, the blast. Jensen sat across from Elena, watching her with that quiet, steady gaze he always carried. He didn't speak until the choppers banked toward base. "You're shaking," he said softly. She glanced down at her hands. He was right. They trembled against her rifle, the adrenaline crashing hard. "I'll stop when my body remembers I'm alive," she muttered, forcing her grip tighter until the tremors stilled. Colonel Briggs was seated near the cockpit, his face unreadable, but his silence cut sharper than a reprimand. Elena could feel his stare even when he didn't look at her, the weight of unspoken fury pressing against her chest. She disobeyed him again, openly this time, and dragged the squad into it. And yet the prisoners were sitting there, breathing proof she'd been right. When they landed, medics rushed the prisoners away. The squad filed out, weapons heavy, boots dragging across the tarmac. Briggs dismissed the others with a curt order, but his eyes locked on Elena. "With me." She followed him into a deserted hangar, the echo of their footsteps bouncing against steel walls. He stopped in the center, turning sharply to face her. "You think you won," he said, voice low and venomous. Elena didn't flinch. "We did win. The stronghold's rubble, the prisoners are alive, and my squad is intact." "You gambled with all of them," he snapped. "Do you understand that? If one of those charges had gone off early, if one ambush had gone differently, you'd have buried everyone under that canyon. And for what? Your conscience." Her hands curled into fists. "For their lives. They weren't numbers on a map, they weren't objectives, they were people. Leaving them would have been a betrayal." Briggs stepped closer, eyes burning. "You think this war gives you the luxury of morality? I need soldiers who follow orders, not martyrs dragging everyone else into their nightmares." The word hit like a slap. "Martyr." She bristled, fighting the urge to spit back, but his words dug deeper than she wanted to admit. Was that what she was doing? Fighting not just to win but to atone? She held his gaze. "If following orders means letting innocents die, then maybe I'm not the soldier you want." For a long moment, silence filled the hangar. Then Briggs exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "God damn it, Sergeant. You're the best and worst thing in this unit. And you're going to break it in half if you keep forcing everyone to choose between me and you." He turned on his heel and stormed out, leaving her standing in the echo of his words. That night, Elena sat outside the barracks, staring at the endless desert stretching beyond the wire. The air was cold, stars like shattered glass across the sky. Jensen appeared, carrying 2 tin cups of coffee. He handed one to her, sitting beside her without asking. "He's right about one thing," Jensen said quietly after a while. "You scare him. You scare all of us sometimes. Because you don't stop." She took a slow sip, the bitter taste grounding her. "Stopping is how they break you," she whispered. Jensen studied her profile, the scars just visible where her shirt collar slipped. "What happened to you?" The question was gentle, but it cut deeper than Briggs's accusations. She clenched her jaw, staring at the dark horizon. For a moment she almost told him, about the years stolen, the pain carved into her body, the way survival had become the only thing she knew. But the words lodged in her throat like shrapnel. Instead she said, "It doesn't matter. What matters is I survived. And I won't let anyone else go through it if I can stop it." Jensen didn't push. He just nodded slowly. "Then I'll keep standing with you. Even if it means taking the colonel's wrath too." She turned to him, searching his face, and saw nothing but steady truth. Something inside her eased just slightly. The reprieve didn't last. 3 days later, alarms ripped through the base in the dead of night. Sirens wailed, boots pounded, voices shouted. Elena sprang from her bunk, grabbing her rifle, heart slamming in her chest. "Attack." Jensen barked as he burst from the barracks beside her. "Not yet," she said, listening. The sirens weren't the steady scream of an incoming assault. They were urgent, erratic. Different. Briggs's voice roared across the yard. "All squads to briefing now." They assembled in the command tent, faces pale under the harsh light. A map glowed on the table, red markers clustering like a spreading infection. Briggs pointed, voice clipped. "Satellite intel confirms a large-scale mobilization. Hundreds of fighters converging on this sector. They're done with ambushes. They're coming for the base itself." A low murmur rippled through the room. Elena's gut clenched. "They want to overrun us before reinforcements arrive," Briggs continued. "We're outnumbered 3-1. If we stand and fight, we die here. So we don't stand. We move." Elena frowned. "Evacuation." "Not exactly. Reinforcements are 3 days out. We can't hold this base that long. But if we pull back to the high ground here," he jabbed a finger at a ridge line to the west, "we can force them into a bottleneck. Make them pay for every inch. Another soldier muttered, and if they break through? Then we fall, Briggs said flatly. The tent was silent. Elena's mind raced. A tactical withdrawal was the smart move. But she also knew what it meant. Leaving behind supplies, civilians working at the base, possibly even wounded too weak to move. The thought twisted in her gut. After the briefing she caught Briggs outside. You're abandoning people. He spun on her, fury flashing. I am saving the ones I can. You want to die defending crates of ammunition and non-combat staff who can't be moved? That's not strategy. That's suicide. Her voice rose. So you decide who gets left behind? Who gets to live? Yes, he snapped, stepping closer. That's command. That's the weight I carry. And you don't get to undermine it again, not this time. If you do, I'll have you pulled from the field in irons. Do you understand me? The words hit like a physical blow. For the first time, Briggs wasn't threatening discipline, he was promising it. And by the fire in his eyes, she knew he meant it. She stood rigid, every instinct screaming to fight back. But she forced her voice level. Understood, sir. That night, as the base prepared to move, Elena sat on her bunk, cleaning her rifle with methodical precision. Jensen entered quietly. You're not going to follow his order, are you? She looked up sharply. What makes you think that? Because I know you, he said simply. And because I saw your face when he said to leave people behind. Her hands stilled. She wanted to deny it, to tell him she'd fall in line this time, but the lie refused to form. There are civilians here, she whispered. Contractors, engineers, locals who trusted us to protect them. They won't all make it out in time. And Briggs is willing to cut them loose for the fight. And you're not, Jensen said. She shook her head. I can't. Not again. Jensen studied her, then nodded. Then I'm with you. Her throat tightened. She hadn't asked, hadn't expected it, but hearing him say it lit something fierce inside her chest. The withdrawal began at dawn. Convoys rolled west, soldiers flanking, the base stripped down to bare essentials. But in the chaos, Elena and Jensen slipped away, guiding a group of civilians, contractors and medics too slow to be loaded, through a side route. It was risky. Too risky. And when the first crack of gunfire split the air, she knew Briggs's prediction was coming true. Enemy scouts had found them. Move, she barked, her rifle spitting fire. Jensen covered the rear, precise and unyielding. Bullets tore the sand around them, civilians screaming as they stumbled forward. They reached a dry ravine, scrambling down into cover. Elena's chest burned, her scars searing, but she shoved the civilians ahead. Keep going. Don't stop. An RPG slammed into the ridge above, showering them with rock. Jensen cursed, dragging her down as shards ripped the air. They were cut off, surrounded on three sides. Insurgents poured into the ravine, shouting, rifles raised. Elena rose, fury blazing. Her voice carried like thunder. You'll have to kill me to take them. And for a heartbeat, the battlefield held its breath. The medevac bird lifted off in a rush of rotor wash and choking dust, carrying Sergeant Morales and the badly wounded intel specialist. Captain Walker shielded his eyes, the desert night whipping grit against his face, and then turned back toward his remaining squad. They were bone-tired, bruised, low on ammo, but none of them had cracked. That counted for something. But the war wasn't done with them. The colonel's order had come down an hour earlier. Hold the line, keep the supply corridor open, or the entire forward battalion would be cut off. It wasn't a glamorous assignment. It was suicide dressed in olive drab. All right, listen up. Walker barked, trying to drown out the lingering chop of the helicopter as it faded into the horizon. We've got one objective. Hold that damn road until sunrise. If the enemy wants it, they're gonna have to bleed for it. Private Dixon, face smeared black with soot and sweat, muttered, I didn't sign up to be a toll booth operator, sir. Even in the dark, a ripple of nervous laughter spread through the squad. Tension cracked for a heartbeat. Walker let it happen. Hell, he encouraged it. A laugh now meant one more ounce of sanity they could hang on to when the shooting started. Staff Sergeant Rourke adjusted the bandage on his arm where shrapnel had dug deep earlier. He winced, then squared his shoulders. Perimeter's weak. I got claymores, 2 at 4S, and about 3 good hours before this adrenaline wears off and I collapse like a sack of potatoes. Where do you want me? Walker pointed at the ridge overlooking the road. Set your toys there. You'll have the best angle. Dixon, you're with him. Don't argue. The kid opened his mouth but shut it again under Rourke's glare. Specialist Tran knelt, checking the feed tray on her saw for the 100th time that night. She caught Walker's eye. Sir, you think they'll really come tonight? "They'll come," Walker said flatly. He could feel it in the stillness of the desert air, in the way the stars seemed colder than usual. "They know we're cut thin. They smell weakness." And sure enough, less than an hour later, the first mortar whistled overhead. It landed short of the roadblock, throwing dirt sky-high and rattling teeth in skulls. The squad scattered to positions they'd rehearsed but prayed they'd never have to use. "Here it comes," Rourke shouted, slamming a claymore into the earth and arming the firing device. Dixon dove behind a sandbag wall, whispering a prayer that sounded like half a joke. Tran yanked her helmet tight and dug in with her weapon pointed toward the shimmering dark horizon. Walker crouched behind the burned-out husk of a Humvee, radio pressed to his ear. Static hissed, broken only by fragments of command chatter. No reinforcements. No air cover. Just them. The second barrage landed closer. The desert floor shook and something inside Walker's chest seemed to quake with it. His heart pounded. His ears rang. He forced his mind clear. "Steady," he yelled. "Hold until you see them." And then they came, silhouettes moving low and fast, weapons flashing in the night. A tide of enemies, darker than the dark itself. Tran saw thundered first, red tracers cutting the black. One enemy dropped, then another. The rest scattered, answering with bursts of gunfire that chewed the dirt inches from her helmet. Rourke hit the clacker, and his claymore spat steel and fire into the wave. Screams tore through the night, but more shadows pushed forward. "Reloading," Dixon cried, fumbling with his M4 as bullets whipped over his head. "Cover him," Walker barked, leaning from behind the Humvee to put two controlled bursts into the advancing figures. His rounds found one target who crumpled mid-run, but the rest barely slowed. The firefight raged. Minutes bled into eternity. Ammunition magazines emptied, reloaded, emptied again. The squad shrank tighter and tighter around the road, holding by sheer willpower and training. In the chaos, Morales's replacement, Private Lanning, fresh-faced and too young for the scars he was earning, took a round through the shoulder. He went down screaming. Walker crawled across open dirt under fire, dragging him behind cover while yelling for Tran to keep the line hot. "You'll live," Walker told Lanning, pressing a bandage against the wound even as his hands shook. "But you gotta stay quiet. Don't waste air screaming. Save it for fighting." Lanning gritted his teeth, tears streaking through grime, and nodded. The enemy pressure didn't let up. If anything, it mounted. Mortars bracketed their position, each blast closer than the last, threatening to obliterate the entire squad in one lucky hit. Then in the middle of it all, Walker's radio cracked alive. "Outpost Bravo, this is command. Reinforcements are 2 hours out. Repeat, 2 hours. Hold the line. 2 hours." In a battle like this, 2 hours was the difference between alive and dead. Between names on a roster and names on a wall. Walker closed his eyes, breathed once and keyed the mic. "Copy, command. We'll hold." He wasn't sure if it was truth or just a lie he wanted to believe. By the 90-minute mark, the battlefield looked like a nightmare. The air stank of cordite and blood. The sandbags were shredded, the Humvee burned hotter, and the squad was down to their last magazines. Tran saw had gone quiet, barrel warped beyond use. She'd picked up a fallen enemy rifle without hesitation. Rourke was pale, lips cracked, but still moving, firing, shouting curses at anyone dumb enough to get close. Dixon had lost his helmet and half his nerve, but his hands kept squeezing the trigger anyway because stopping wasn't an option. Walker himself had taken shrapnel in the side, every breath sharp with pain, but he refused to let his men see him falter. And then came the moment that would haunt him for years. The last wave hit harder than all the rest. Grenades bounced into their lines. One detonated too close, throwing Dixon backward in a spray of dirt and blood. He didn't get up. Walker froze for half a heartbeat, staring at the kid sprawled on the ground. The same kid who cracked jokes when fear threatened to swallow them whole. The same kid who prayed half seriously before every firefight. Gone in an instant. Rourke's roar snapped him back. "Walker, get your head in the fight." Walker blinked, rage boiling where grief threatened to take root. He grabbed the AT-4 propped against the Humvee, swung it onto his shoulder, and sighted down the tube. The largest cluster of enemies surged toward them across the road. He squeezed the trigger. The rocket screamed, then exploded in a blossom of fire and earth that tore a crater in the desert. Bodies flew. The assault staggered. And just as the smoke cleared, headlights pierced the horizon. Reinforcements. American armored vehicles thundered forward, guns blazing, pushing back the attackers with overwhelming firepower. The remnants of the enemy broke and scattered, fading into the desert night as quickly as they had appeared. The battlefield fell eerily silent. Walker lowered the empty at 4, chest heaving. He turned slowly, taking stock. Rourke still standing barely. Tran bleeding from a cut on her forehead but alive. Lanning pale but conscious. Dixon, no breath, no movement, no second chances. Walker felt the weight of it crash down. Victory maybe. Survival sure. But at a cost that burned deeper than any wound. The colonel arrived with the reinforcements, stepping out of his armored vehicle with that rigid posture that said he expected discipline even in hell itself. He scanned the carnage, then let his gaze settle on Walker. "You held," the colonel said simply. Walker's jaw clenched. "We lost Dixon." The colonel's eyes flickered, then hardened again. "Soldiers die. The road's open. That's what matters." Walker wanted to argue, to scream that Dixon mattered too, that his life wasn't just a line on a report. But his body betrayed him. He sagged against the Humvee, blood soaking his uniform, vision blurring at the edges. "Get these men medical attention," the colonel ordered, almost as an afterthought. As medics rushed in, Walker felt Tran's hand on his shoulder. Her voice was raw, barely steady. "He was right, sir. Dixon mattered. We all saw it. We'll remember." Walker managed a nod. It was all he could do. The medics hoisted him onto a stretcher, the desert sky wheeling above him. Stars blurred into streaks. His mind swam with images, the fire, the blood, Dixon's crooked grin, the roar of the at-4. He closed his eyes, not from weakness but because the memories burned too bright. And somewhere in that half-conscious haze, he knew the war wasn't done with him. Not by a long shot. Because tomorrow there would be another road to hold, another line to defend, another name to risk losing. And the marks on his soul, like the scars on his soldiers' bodies, would only grow deeper. But for tonight they had survived. And survival in this war was victory enough. The end.